Hi there, I'm Clarence Waldron. Welcome back to Black Muse. Tonight's guest is a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Margena A. the best-selling author of this brand new book, It's No Wonder, The Life and Times of Motown's legendary songwriter, Sylvia Moy. Sylvia wrote early Stevie Wonder classics, My Sharia Moore, and Uptight, Everything's All Right. Margena, let's get started.
Thank you
what's
for
going
having
on?
me. And,
Yeah.
and you, and I.
We're back together
again.
This is your third time on Black Music.
Actually, is it my third
It's your
time?
third.
It's my third.
It's your
Oh,
third.
wow. Well, three
Yeah,
times
so there it is.
is
There it
charm,
is.
the third
Yes,
time.
indeed. But so let's go ahead. How did you get started? How did you hear about Sylvia Moore?
Well, it was in 2021 during the pandemic. And when most people were glued to social media, I was like everyone else. And I happened to have seen a post on Instagram as well as a post on Facebook. And it was an image of Sylvia Moy in the Motown studio. And sitting on the piano bench was a young Stevie Wonder with his harmonica. And then there were three members of the Funk Brothers behind them. And that image stood out, but the caption really caught my eye because there were some claims in it that I had never heard, that she was the first female songwriter producer at Motown, and that she helped to save Stevie Wonder's career because he was on the verge of being let go at Motown. I never heard either of those claims, and that stood out to me. But it was something people were really intrigued by, the image and the story, and people were saying, oh, we want to know more about her, and we hope she got her just due, and we hope that she was happy, but it was something about her face. Looking at it was like maybe 10,000 likes on the Instagram post and maybe 5 on the Facebook post, and then hundreds of comments, and people wanted to know more. And there was something about her face that felt like it was saying, who's going to tell my story? And because she was just she was so beautiful, but it was like her face was speaking volumes. And so I first thought to myself, having the history from, working at Ebony and Jet magazine, which we recorded history. And if any place would have had stories on Sylvia Moy, certainly it would have been Ebony and Jet. So when I went to look to do some research in the archives, I did not find anything on her. And that stood out. Why don't we know who she is? And why is this story not more well known about her having saved Stevie Wonder? Because people would say, has he ever needed to be saved? That's how I first came about that story. And that's what made me start to want to dig more to find out, why isn't her history documented with everything that she did? That was the $1 million question that I sought out to find.
Wow. Okay. Now, how did she end up hooking up with Stevie Wonder?
She ended up hooking up with Stevie Wonder because at Motown, Stevie Wonder, he was signed on at 11 years old. By the time he was 12 years old, he made his history and got his big break here in Chicago when he was at the Regal Theater on the South Side, and he did a live version of Fingertips Part 2.
Yep.
And so with that song, it did extremely well by the time Motown had the album come out the following year, which was the 12-Year-Old Genius. But by that next year, he was 13. And you know how kids are. I'm not 12 anymore, I'm 13. But long story short, that album and that song really catapulted him. But after that, there was like a lull. So everybody in Motown about this time, so she came to Motown in 64. So around 65-ish, we're approaching this 3-year lull. Everybody else is doing well, the Supremes, the Temptations, but little Stevie is still not, he had that one hit. But we don't want him to be a one-hit wonder. And so what happened was each producer, songwriter had an assignment, is what they would call it. And so during a meeting, Mickey Stevenson, who was the head of A&R at the time, director, he from what she said, he was handing out assignments, and he had given everyone their assignment. And as everyone was about to exit the meeting, he said, "Oh, I forgot one person, Stevie Wonder. Is there anyone who would volunteer to work with him?" And nobody volunteered. And so at the time, she was the only female in this producer meeting. After the meeting, so he said, "Okay, if we don't have any volunteers, it looks like we're going to have to cut him. We're going to have to let him go." And so she said that after that meeting, she went up to him and said, "I don't think it's over for Stevie. And I want to try, if it's possible, if I could get a hit on him, would you consider keeping him?" But she also negotiated. So he thought about it. He had to get an approval or whatever. Came back and said, "You got your assignment." But she also negotiated, from what I understood, to not only write a hit but also to produce it. And so that's how she came into Stevie's orbit, where they started working together. And it was because of her stepping out and saying, "I think there's something to this. Let's not give up on him so soon." Yeah.
The book is so very well reported, Margena. She used to sing or say the lyrics to Stevie as she was recording them in the studio. Is that real?
Yes,
Bad?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, prior to Sylvia working with Stevie, he worked with Clarence Paul. And Clarence Paul was someone who had taken Stevie on early on when he was 11 years old. And the way Clarence Paul was a singer as well. As a matter of fact, he and Mickey used to perform together. But at any rate, Clarence Paul had a system because Stevie no one there knew Braille. So what Stevie did was he would be in the studio with Clarence Paul. Clarence would be next to him, and he would whisper the lyrics to Stevie. And so that is how Stevie would sing them. But then, before his time with Stevie ended, there was a system in place where they were able to have somebody in the studio and then somebody in the recording booth. And so that way she was able to, in the headset, to say the lyrics a line or two ahead of him. And then he would listen and he would sing. So pretty much adopting and continuing what Clarence did to another level. And that's what she had to learn. That was her learning curve because she hadn't considered that.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how long did it take you to finish this book?
With research and writing, I would say it was probably about 3 years.
Yeah.
About 3 years.
Is that the average time for a book?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
Because I had a lot of downtime. And then there were some stops and starts, in terms of just writing, research, and then just life in general. There's no definitive answer in terms of how long it takes to write a book. Some people, it's taken a decade. Some people it's taken 5 years, 4 years. So 3 years of writing, but for the whole process, it probably about 4 years.
4 years.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Now, I know that music journalists noticed that Stevie Wonder's mother got a credit for co-writing "I Was Made to Love Her." Can you elaborate on that?
Yes,
How
yes.
did his mother become a songwriter?
Okay, that's yeah. There was as a journalist to journalist and an observant one at that. Someone Sylvia did an interview with someone for a magazine, and the person inquired, everyone knew the golden trio of Wonder, Cosby, and Moy, and so the person noticed, well, there's a new name, Hardaway. And he was like, so who is Lula Hardaway and what did this person do? So Sylvia said, oh, that's Stevie's mother. And her words were, oh, she didn't do anything. But that was the first song that she was credited on as a songwriter.
Wow.
And so that was the first song. And that was the second big song that they did together. So her name was on the song as a songwriter.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. And how about Signed, Sealed, Delivered, and Ain't Too Proud to Beg? Because Sylvia was very disappointed or very disturbed when people would ask her about those songs in particular. What was that about, Margena?
That's a great question. Great question. There was some belief and then strong possibilities and some evidence I gathered from research that she had a hand in writing both being involved. If we start with Signed, Sealed, Delivered, that would have marked the last of one of her songs in her time working with Stevie. So she started with Uptight, and if those claims are correct, then she would have ended with Signed, Sealed, Delivered, which showed this woman was solid from beginning to end. And with Signed, Sealed, Delivered, there were many names on the song, including Lula Mae Hardaway. And then as it related to Ain't Too Proud to Beg, I did interview, that song was credited and written by Eddie Holland and also the late Norman Whitfield. And there's some speculation that perhaps she had a hand in that. But in interviewing Eddie Holland, he said, no, she couldn't have. He said, but Norman brought some lyrics to me. They were the worst lyrics I'd ever seen. He said, but I don't know where he got the lyrics from. And I said, I said, well, is it possible that the lyrics came from her? He said, I don't know, because she wrote better than what he gave me. And he said, everything that Sylvia wrote made sense. And then he said, but the only thing that made sense was the line, ain't too proud to be. So there's some possibility and evidence. Two ethnomusicologists, one in particular, I found it was very interesting because in conducting my research, because I part investigative journalism as well as scholarly research. Through the scholarly aspect of it, I found a book by an ethnomusicologist, Dr. Jim Perot, and in it, the book was called The Sound of Stevie Wonder. And in it, of all of the songs, amazingly, this book was written in 2006. He made a comparison to Ain't Too Proud to Beg and Signed, Sealed, Delivered. That was fascinating to me, and it stood out. And so I found him and I interviewed him, and I mentioned the claim and the possibility that which he had no clue about. But one thing about songwriters is that there's something about their imprint. There's something that they whisper into what they do. And so no matter if they are credited or not, there's something about what they do that speaks life into what it is that they've done. So the evidence is there, and it's for the readers to decide. But she was disappointed and just didn't like to talk about those songs. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So was she ever fully recognized as a producer and songwriter, or was it pretty much just as a songwriter? Was she ever recognized for that?
She was widely praised and celebrated and recognized as a songwriter and eventually as a producer. However, that has been coming up more lately about her being a producer. But what stood out to me with my research and in approaching this book, I could not find evidence of anything she produced because her name wasn't on any record. And so how is she getting credit as a producer and one of the first? Because as we know, Janie Bradford was the first female songwriter. And then we had first female arranger, producer, Ray Noma's Gordy Singleton. Sylvia came in as the first female to do both, write and produce at the same time. But that aspect of her producing gave me pause because I could not find anything that her name was on. So turns out the first song, Uptight, is where she was to get producing credit, but she did not. So she said she got production royalties for 2 songs, but she did not get the credit. And so going back to my research as a scholar, another professor, so on the other hand, so we had Dr. James Perron, and then we had Dr. Charles Sykes, who also did some research and did work with Motown's museum. He was part of a book called Black Issues in Higher Education. It dealt with power, gender, race, and representation. He did a chapter on Motown. And in it was a footnote that said she claimed to have produced these two songs. And the song was Uptight and I Was Made to Love Her. And so, like I reached out to Dr. Perone for an interview, I reached out to Dr. Sykes. And I said, do you remember this woman? What can you tell me? And he told me these were things she said. I asked if he still had the recording. He did. Ooh. And in her own voice, I heard what she said she produced. I heard her tell the story of how she was to get credit for Uptight. And she said that she didn't, and how she did not let them see her. But she said, I left outside of the door, and she said, I cried. Just listening to that still touches me. And it touched him as well, because he said he just remembers her face when she talked about it. But I could hear her voice from the recording. But it just goes to show you that history can be hidden, and people can try to write you out and wipe you out of your own history. But the wonderful thing about it is that history is never erased. Okay. So the truth will always prevail.
Yeah. Now, this is Women's History Month.
Yes.
Can you sort of describe life back in the 60s and 70s for women in the music industry? What was it like back then?
Well, one thing that I found that was a common denominator was that most of the female songwriters, and we're not talking just African American, most of the female songwriters, in order to get credit, they had to have a partnership, and they were usually married. So we had Carole King, Gary Goffin, and then we had Ellie Greenrich, and then we had Cynthia Weil, and then we had Valerie Simpson. And they were all married, so they got credit as songwriters. Sylvia Moy was solo.
Oh.
So, first of all, women had to be partnered with a male in order to get that credit. So, trying to be a producer was almost unheard of, because it was not an area. Being a producer in music is like being a quarterback for football. That's the thinking person's position. And so I found that common thread was that these women had partners and she didn't. Wow. So the fact that she did what she did and was able to circumvent this system. Now, she had someone who stepped up, who was male at Motown, Henry Hank Cosby, who stepped up and knew, okay, I have to help her and be by her side, because if I don't, it's going to be difficult for her to penetrate the system. He did that. He didn't have to do that. So she learned from the best. There were talented musicians in Motown, but many of them could not read music. Some of them were skilled and could read music, like the Paul Risers and the Henry Hank Cosbys. So she learned from the best. And so learning from them, she learned how to produce. And she was like, I'm doing what they're doing. I should get credit. So that was a struggle for women then and even now. USC Annenberg, every year they do an inclusion initiative about music and females, specifically focusing on songwriters and producers. And their research within that span of a decade, as recent as 2024, there were maybe about 2,000 pop mainstream songs and only 14 women producers. And of those 14 women producers, can you guess how many of them were women of color?
Not many.
Just two.
Two.
And being a person of color doesn't necessarily mean that that person is African American.
Right.
So this is in 2024. So imagine what it was like in the 60s.
Yeah,
she helped to open doors not just for Black women, but for all women. She helped to open doors not just at Motown, but in the music industry in general. Because this wasn't just a Sylvia Moy problem. This was a female problem in general, that women were to be in certain roles and certain positions. And she was one of those people who dared to say, I can do this. So when you are a pioneer, you pay the price. And so you open the door for others, and sometimes the door is slammed in your face. Or when you are raising awareness about issues, sometimes people will turn it on you and make you the issue. You point out the problem, you are the problem, and that's not the case. She bravely and courageously spoke out to raise awareness, and she always wanted her voice to be heard, which is what I learned so much from her. She might have been quiet, but that didn't mean she had nothing to say. Because, baby, when it came to doing this research, she spoke. She spoke life into this book. I mean, through my research, she did interviews with the more than 50 books written about Motown. People interviewed her about everybody and the history and this and that, when all the while the best subject was right in front of them. And so from all of that, she spoke. And so I heard from her voice. So it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
Yeah. So here we are now today. How should we celebrate Women's History Month?
We should celebrate Women's History Month by understanding, first of all, it's not just a month that we are to be celebrating. We are to be celebrated every day, all day.
Okay.
And what Sylvia Moy showed in the music industry in general is the strength of a woman. And Stevie Wonder couldn't help but be great because he was touched by the hand of love. He was touched by the hand of Sylvia Moy, a female.
Whoa.
And so he learned from the best, and she learned from the best. Do you see?
Yes.
And she bravely opened doors. And it was a travesty that we didn't know about her when we should have known about her. It would have been wonderful for her to have realized the full realization of all that's coming, the praise and celebration of her story being told. And it's not one-sided. And it's in all sides being told. But speaking of producing, interestingly enough, one person who did say that she was a producer, because some of the other men that I interviewed said no, she wasn't.
Right.
To this day, still said no.
Right.
But Smokey Robinson was one who said yes. She did produce a few things, and some other women produced stuff as well. He was one, and then Paul Reiser was also someone who said yes, she was a producer. Some of the other men were like, with their chest, their whole chest. No, she was not. She wanted to produce, or she thought she would, but they still believe no. So going back to some of these things that I was up against, I had a chorus of people yay, a chorus of people nay.
Right.
Just like were they going to let him go or were they not? There were people who said no. There were people who said yes. So I had to do the research, because I had to make sure everything was solid. Solid as a rock.
Solid as a rock.
Solid as a rock.
All right now. All right now. So what do you hope readers will take away from reading this book?
I want readers to take away the greatness of what this woman did and how she opened doors. And that Motown was at its pinnacle, at its height in 65 and 64, 65. It was becoming what it was. It was the machine. It was Hitsville, USA. And during that time, they were extremely competitive. That a woman was in the trenches with the men, and she was competing, and she was carrying and holding her own. That was so beautiful. And Eddie Holland spoke to that, how that was something special. And a few of them mentioned how it was almost as if she was an angel. And that was their term. And how this woman was quiet. She moved through the system. And it was difficult because the system had a lot going on. But she moved through it extremely well. And she did her work. She might not have spoke a lot, but her work spoke for her. And that which she didn't get credit for then, once again, it doesn't matter how long it takes. History may be attempts to erase it or to hide it. But it is never ever erased.
Never.
It's
Never.
always somewhere lurking around the corner, waiting to take center stage.
Waiting for you to do your book.
Waiting for someone. Waiting for someone. Yes.
So, Margena, for you now, what are your takeaways, your personal takeaways, after you studied and you researched Sylvia Moore's life, what would you take away from all that?
I will take away that it doesn't matter how long it takes, just as long as your voice is heard. And that just because history is not recorded doesn't mean that it did not take place and happen. Because history is dictated. We're in a patriarchal society. This was her story.
Okay.
And there's a lot of herstories that are hidden and a lot of herstories that are wiped out. Case in point, the rapper Eve, she was faithful. And it took her 26 years to finally get credit for You Got Me, that Grammy Award winning song with the Roots. 26 years. And eventually, she was given what she earned.
Right.
That speaks to hope.
Yeah.
That perhaps this is signaling that in the ninth hour, the winds of change are coming. And that if other people's errors and omissions have been corrected and rectified, perhaps the same could be with her. That her name could be on something as a producer with Motown. Because when she left Motown, she did her own thing. She didn't have to answer to anyone. So she built for everyone who says she wasn't a producer, she had her own production and recording studio in her house. So she didn't wait for someone to give her a seat at the table. She built the table and she owned the house.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
yes.
so if that doesn't tell you she was a producer, I don't know what else does.
Right.
So it speaks to how she demonstrated agency for herself and for others, because she was advocating for not just women, but also for the men. Stop selling your lyrics to other songwriters and to speak up for what you deserve. You wrote this, you should have gotten credit. While she was a female and didn't get credit, there were lots of men who also did things who never got credit. Okay? Fingertips Part 1 was a flute solo for the most part, and Little Stevie played the bongos. Thomas Dr. Bean's Bowl, I don't think he ever really fully got credit for that song.
Right.
So when Stevie did Fingertips Part 2, his harmonica mimicked that flute solo. So it wasn't just something that happened to Sylvia Moy. And this was documented. People throughout the years and the many Motown books talked about it. But it wasn't just a Motown thing. This was a music industry thing where credit was a problem for everyone. And credit was more of a problem for females.
Right.
So it happened more in mainstream labels. Okay. It was just more magnified at this label because Motown was one of the first to do it this way and to this magnitude, the greatness of it. But it was just something that was happening at all labels, and it was just easier for it to happen with women, unfortunately.
Now, this is not your first book.
It's not my first rodeo.
This is not your first rodeo.
It is not my first rodeo. Yes.
Let's go back to that first book.
Yes, so my first book was based on research while I was working on my doctorate. So my dissertation was based on research surrounding our late boss, John H. Johnson, founder of Johnson Publishing Company, which once was the home of Ebony and Jet magazines, which documented, recorded history, as I mentioned earlier. And I say this, what Berry Gordy was to the music industry, John H. Johnson was to the magazine and publishing world. And at that time in the 60s, they were the two largest, African-American owned businesses. And they worked together. They worked hand in hand. So we understood the world of publishing magazines, which is very different than music publishing. It's not the same. Okay. It is not the same. But yes, this is not my first rodeo with the book. So having written about John H. Johnson, a man who documented history, yet he's buried in history. People don't quite know him as much as they knew his magazines, So doing these kinds of books, I enjoy being able to tell these kinds of stories about these figures that considered to be marginalized, but actually did things for the world at large. His magazines weren't just for African American people. Other races learned about us through these magazines.
Absolutely.
So yes.
Absolutely. So where can our viewers get a copy?
Well, both books, everywhere books are sold.
Good, good, good. So what's next for you?
What is next for me? I'm working on some other projects. I'm actually working on something that there was a songwriter. There are other women who did incredible things and didn't quite get their just due. So there was another songwriter I was looking at whose life was cut short by cancer. And I never dreamed I'd be a part of the story I was actually writing and researching. I remember you used to tell me, when you write a story, you become the subject. Well, I had no intentions of becoming the subject with this. So as a stage 4 ovarian cancer survivor, being creative in the midst of cancer is difficult. But it can be a gift because it gives you hope. I'd like to say that I gave Sylvia Moy life through this book, and she returned the favor, because while I was fighting for my life, it gave me hope. God, how could you not see me through to tell this story? And
My Lord. All right.
So I look at that. I look at that, and I say, no weapon, no weapon. So nothing will keep the truth from coming through as it relates to history. And so that's what I say. No matter the beauty about it, it's never erased. It's never erased. So I'm looking to look at how people navigate entertainment while you're coping with something so devastating. So it's a creative spin. But I look at all of those people who continue to make us happy and entertain for us while they were behind closed doors, suffering in silence, and we never knew. So that's something I'm kind of looking at.
Right.
It's like I want to be a voice for the voiceless. They speak to me in that way.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to share? Anything else on your mind?
Anything else I want to share?
Did we take care of it all, y'all?
So in the words of Della Reese, no, dear, that is all.
You're so silly.
That is all. That is all. And I interviewed her for Jet magazine, but then when I after getting my doctorate, in order to write for Oxford University Press's American National Biography, they reached out and I did her obit, or rather documented her history.
Oh, really?
And so
I didn't know that.
to have interviewed someone, and there were quite a few of them, like Aaliyah. I had interviewed her, but then to have written about her on the other side,
right.
was and then Johnny Johnson, and so it was interesting. But then thinking about her,
right?
You know, we'd always say, anything else you'd like to add? No, darling, that's it. So no, darling, that's it. So thank you,
So
thank you.
Okay, all right. Before we go, I got to do 2 quick commercials. First, we're not at home, and we're not via Zoom. We are on location at Norman's Bistro on 43rd Street. And I want to thank Norman Bolden for allowing us to come in to do this historic interview. So thanks, Norm. And also, before we close, I got to do a quick commercial, a little shout out, if I can, to Howard Sandifer and his wife, Darlene Sandifer. They are the founders of the Chicago West Community Music Center. And this whole video podcast was their idea. They said, let's have lively conversation with newsmakers like Margena. So we thank them for that. And also for the viewers out there, that you know the drill. You know what to do. I don't need to say it. But please click like and subscribe. Please click like and subscribe. Thank you all. Appreciate it. See you later.